And I'm so happy to see each of you here tonight. Thanks so much for coming. We are honored that David Gershon has come to UCSB to share ideas and his vision for creating, yes, a carbon-neutral Isla Vista by 2025. That would put us, well, let's see if the plan is good. That would put us on track to being the first community to achieve this critical climate milestone in the United States. We could become known as the Copenhagen of the West Coast. We're in a competition with Copenhagen. I met David about a year and a half ago, and I got very excited about his approach to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and his highly practical step-by-step program for neighbors to implement it called Cool Block. Since then, I've been helping introduce it here at UCSB, including in my spring 2019 class called The World in 2050, where it was very successfully implemented, with students reducing their carbon footprint by an amazing 25% in about 8 weeks. I guess I'll have to rename that class now to The World in 2025. Yep. David is the founder and CEO of Empowerment Institute. He's the author of 12 books, including the award-winning Social Change 2.0, A Blueprint for Reinventing Our World, and the best-selling Empowerment, The Art of Creating Your Life as You Want It. Given the appalling and indeed criminal lack of climate action at the global or national level, one way forward is to find the pathways to achieving a carbon-neutral state going through carbon-neutral communities. The question for members of the UCSB and Isla Vista communities is, how can our community, which gained some credit for helping birth the modern environmental movement 50 years ago, now stand up and radically up our game in the next 1, 5, and 10 years? Because this is the crucial time in the history of human affairs where we've come to the crossroads. The 2020s promise to be the decade of decision. Each and every one of us can play an essential part in transforming the way our community will face the future. It's up to all of us to try our hands at whatever projects our hearts, minds, and hands are drawn to. The Cool Block program just might help us do that. This evening, David Gershon, founder of the Cool Block program and the Cool California initiative, will offer us his vision of a pathway to enable the seemingly impossible to become possible. He's dedicated his life to empowering people to believe that we can change the world of our dreams, and he's devoted great efforts to designing the strategies and tools to help us make this a reality. Please welcome David Gershon to UCSB.
Thank you, John. As some of you may know, John is the principal, I wouldn't say principal, but certainly one of the key principal climate activists in this campus and the UC system. Are you hearing me okay? So thank you, John, for inviting me here, and thank you all for coming. And thank you all for what you each do. How many of you consider yourself climate activists in one form or another? Okay, so hopefully I'm preaching to most of the choir. I like the choir, because you sing loud enough to get everyone to come into the church. So thank you for coming. So I often think of what we're trying to do as creating a revolution. But not a revolution that is about reacting to the status quo, but one full spiral, evolutionary. So it's a new possibility that we're trying to birth. And what I want to talk about tonight is a pathway to doing that, but also I want to talk about how we change our relationship to time itself. Because time is either an asset or a liability. I'd like to turn it into an asset. Before I start, I want to thank the amazing group of people that have come forward to sponsor this talk. So Santa Barbara County Association of Governments, the Traffic Solutions Division, the County of Santa Barbara Sustainability Division. Garrett is here. Thank you, Garrett, for helping us so much. The UCSB Department of Environmental Studies. Anyone from Environmental Studies here? Yay. Thank you for coming. UCSB Sociology Department. Anyone from Sociology Department? 2 of you. Yay. So you have a big job here. Sunrise, Santa Barbara, UCSB. Anyone from Sunrise? Yay. Okay, thank you. Bren School of Environmental Science and Management. Bren School. Okay, thank you. Vista? Yay. This group is a very powerful little group over here. You got a lot of things you're doing. Isla Vista Community Center. Probably no one from there. And then the Isla Vista Community Services District, who we met with today. Yay. Okay, so we have some representation from all these different places. And I know some people are still on their way here, so hopefully they'll catch up. And we are filming this. So the big question is, how do we get there? This is an audacious goal. How do we get there? So here's how I perceive the climate challenge that we're facing. It's a time challenge. If, in fact, what we've been told by the IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change, is that we have 10 years to get our act together as a species, and most of the solutions are talking about 2050, every carbon neutral scenario, with a few exceptions like Copenhagen and a few other places, is targeting 2050. From the calculations of reality against what our scientists are telling us, against how our path is currently being projected forward, we have 10 years. So how do we speed up time? That's the question that we feel we have to address. And, whoops, wrong direction. So the starting point is to do some exploration of where the carbon's actually coming from. And how do we really get there in the shortest period of time? So some of you may or may not know the statistic, but 70% of the carbon on the planet comes from cities. This is a known fact. So cities are the source of where much of the possible solutions lie. And a lesser known fact is that citizens, our daily lifestyle practices, how we drive our cars and how we use energy in our homes, make up 70%. And if you add the actual consumption element, not just the production side, it's up to 90%. So we are the problem, and we are the solution if we can empower ourselves and if we can empower cities. So that's where we have chosen to focus over the last decade or so of this work. I keep going the wrong direction. This is not a good signal. We got to go the right direction. Okay. So what solutions can create the kind of change we need in the time frame we need? And what we've concluded is that there are top-down solutions, which I want to speak to, and there are bottom-up solutions. So the top-down solutions, the primary climate solutions that are in play right now are technology. They are policy. Technology meaning your EVs, your solar installations, and so on. Policy meaning the goals that are set, the climate action plans that are set at the state or a local level or a federal level. And then market creation is, how do we build the new markets for these technologies? How do we build new markets for being able to take advantage of the multitude of investments in green kinds of infrastructure? So that's market development. This is where much of the action has been, but it's been insufficient by itself. So another area is the bottom up, the work that I've been doing for 30 years, which is getting individuals to adopt low carbon or sustainable lifestyles. So how does that work? Well, again, we've been successful, as John said, 25% carbon reduction for students. This isn't even just people with a big footprint. So it can happen, but it's insufficient by itself. So the question then is, what if we could combine the top down and the bottom up and design what we call a whole system solution. Could that by itself create the breakthrough that we need to get the system working? Which it currently isn't. And what we found was that the driver of this whole thing is behavioral change, because it creates demand for the supply side. It creates demand for political advocacy. It creates demand for new markets. So it is the linchpin of how you create change and how you scale change. And that's the area where we have been concentrating for a very long time through our institute. So enter our Cool Block program. And our Cool Block program has been the process by which we have been learning how to help people make these changes at a significant level. So I want to speak to the Cool Block program, and then I want to transcend the Cool Block program, because this isn't really only about the Cool Block program. It's about how one scales this kind of change in the 10-year time frame. So before I start, and my wife who's here, thank you. You're in the front row. Thank you for holding down the fort for me. Bless your soul, dear wife, Gail. And I formed our Empowerment Institute some 40 years ago. And our world has been about how you empower people to envision and create what they want. How you empower people to envision and create what they want at every level of scale, from the individual to a block, to a neighborhood, to a organization, to a city, to a planet. So that is the operating system embedded in Cool Block and all the other scaling components that I'll share in a moment. So what is the Cool Block program? Fundamentally, it is a leader on a block. How many people here are block leaders? Can I see? Show of hands. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. I think Robin is a block leader. 5. So 5 block leaders. So these are the heroes of our planet right now. Thank you all for choosing to step up and make your block a cooler place and a better place for our planet. So a block leader connects with members of their block, and they create teams of 5 to 8 households, and those teams over 4.5 months go through this process, and they work through 5 topics. They become more resilient, so they can manage whatever climate disasters may come our way. They are able to reduce their footprint. They are learning how to better steward water, and they are increasing the livability of the neighborhood, and then they are empowering others. So that's the fundamental foundation. And imagine this now as embedding an operating system of change on a scale of a block. It's not just that they are making their block better, cooler, reducing its footprint, making it resilient, but this is an operating system for what we call second-order change, or transformative social change, embedded at the scale of a block. That team becomes a force for change in its own right. So where are we? We have, the program is 118 actions. It's a peer support system. The reason why it works is we have accountability between neighbors. It is self-directed meeting guides. That is to say, the team itself can make itself effective without needing outside help of any great consequence. There's a volunteer coach that helps, and then there is a web platform that creates the changes and that helps people begin to track what they're doing. Not makes the changes, but tracks the changes and gives them the information they need to take the actions. So that's the fundamental platform. How does it actually work that people are willing to do something? What is the secret sauce of this program besides the behavioral change? The secret sauce we found is that people are seeking these 3 intrinsic motivations. One is they want greater meaning in their life. Being able to be part of something that's actually able to change the game around climate is a significant opportunity to find meaning. Being able to do something for the sake of your children's future is a significant opportunity for increasing one's meaning in one's life. And then you have community, being able to meet your neighbors. How many of you know your neighbors very well? 2.5. How many might wish to know their neighbors if they had an opportunity better? 8.5, no, 12. So many opportunities. What we find is that people are very hungry for place-based community if given the opportunity. And they say, I want to meet my neighbors. Now, students aren't necessarily having a long-term relationship, but what we're finding, and we're still learning how this works, is that the sense of community in place is also a very attractive thing. And then the third thing that is really powerful is the sense of agency. I may not be able to change the world directly, but I can certainly make my block a better place, and if I can make my block a better place, and others can make their block a better place, and we can make our community a better place, we increase our sense of agency, which is at the heart of this empowerment model. So here's what we've achieved so far in this particular program. We have had 5 cities engaged, and each time we've engaged a city, it's come out of a citizen advocate. So I want to really honor the bottom up properly. It's come out of someone who lives in a community who says, yes, I want to make my community a better place. And they begin the process of engaging their community to do such. So we've worked in Palo Alto and Mountain View and Los Angeles, San Francisco, and now in Isla Vista. We've had 85 cool blocks so far. Now, our history is that we've worked with a variety of other programs that have gone into the cool block program. So over time, we've worked with tens of thousands of blocks in many, many countries. But in this particular configuration, which is a synthesis of all these programs, we have 85. On average, they're reducing their footprint by 25 to 32%, depending upon the household and the community. Well, not the household, but the community. Some places it's easier, and some places it's harder. Here's an interesting statistic. A neighbor knocks on their door and says the following: I'm your neighbor from up the street. I'd like to invite you to a neighborhood gathering to hear about a program sponsored by the Community Service District of Isla Vista or UCSB. The meeting is this Thursday, 7 to 8:30. Can you make it? And 56% of the people who receive that communication actually end up joining a team. So that's a very significant number. It means that those 3 selling points, those 3 what we would call intrinsic motivations, those 3 benefits are strong enough to get people to take time out of their busy life to actually invest in this process and then achieve those results. And we spent many years figuring out how to find the way into someone's responsiveness to such an opportunity. And now we have created an Isla Vista carbon neutral city team. Those people who are the great Margaret Mead quote, never doubt a small group of people can change the world. Can you raise your hands, that team? 1, 2, 3, Robin, Shaylin. So these are the people who are going to start the journey to make Isla Vista a carbon neutral city and be a role model to the world. So thank you all for saying yes, and being part of that small group. I'm very proud of you, and so proud to be part of that team with you. We also have another crazy group of people in Silicon Valley who have another crazy idea. And they want to actually turn Silicon Valley into the first carbon neutral region on the planet. And we're meeting with them next week, and they want to get the place where so much emanates of good, and maybe not so good sometimes, to show what's possible when you can have these companies show up and start to create the kinds of cities that we envision. So that's a different game. We see Isla Vista as the incubator. That goal is by 2030. So Isla Vista, we want to lead the charge by 2025. So that's another adventure that we're embarked upon. Okay, so the big question is, sounds good, as John said, well, what about the plan? Is it any good? Will we get there? And the answer is, I don't know. Let's see if this plan holds water as you listen to it. Because this is an audacious goal. So one of my areas of interest is the study of tipping points, because tipping points is a lever for change. And over the course of my work, I've identified 3 different pathways, or 3 different bodies of thinking on how tipping points get activated. So the first one I want to speak to is the diffusion of innovation. Some of you may know that work if you do work around technology. And basically, the diffusion of innovation is based on research by Everett Rogers out of Stanford, who studied how innovations diffuse, be new technologies, seed strains for farmers, new medicines, of course, new technologies. And what they found was that the way it works is a innovator, us, some of us doing this, start to tell the story of this innovation to the early adopters who have a predisposition for adopting a new innovation. They have two characteristics. They seek out change and they have a high tolerance for experimentation. They represent about 15%. If, in fact, they perceive it to be valid and scalable, they will, in fact, start to diffuse it to the early majority, who are the belongers, and then it moves into the late majority. So our goal here is to target early adopters. And the great thing is that early adopters target us, because they would come to a talk like this, right? So expect that you are part of that for this kind of innovation. So diffusion of innovation is a key part of it. And what it says is that 15% you hit a tipping point where it starts diffusing on its own momentum, if it has the makings to be able to diffuse. And not all do. Many die on the vine. But if it could, that's the number. So it's not like you're going after the most difficult. You're going after the most receptive. And we have 15 students who have committed to being cool block leaders who are the early adopters for this program right now at UCSB. But that's only one of the puzzle pieces. The second one is something called cyclogenesis, which I learned about from my friend sitting in the back row, David Hofstetter. Welcome, David. And cyclogenesis is the science of how hurricanes form, or how in the natural world small changes start to build up. And the idea is that these small vortices combine and expand. And at a certain point in time, they hit a tipping point. And all of a sudden, they start to have impact, and they become hurricane scale. So each block is a small vortice. Each of those blocks. So all you block leaders, think of yourself now as the beginning of creating this, whatever we want to call this hurricane, this commitment for a radical change of possibility for how we think about climate and community, for that matter. So that's the second one. And then the third one is this notion that's part of evolutionary biology called punctuated equilibrium. So punctuated equilibrium is the science of how rapid change happens from a steady state to a new state. And it happens when there is an extinction level threat. When there's an extinction level threat. And all of a sudden, what you discover is that you have a rapid state change. We are now facing an extinction level threat. So the science of tipping points is telling us that if we are able to take advantage of the opportunity in front of us, time is now our friend. For the first time on the planet, we have to change or we go extinct. That's a profound opportunity if we seize it. Of course, if we don't, that's the bad side of the story. So we're going to seize it, right? I know Ronaldo quickly went to that one. He's very attentive to all the downsides of how we might go extinct quickly. But he's also very attentive to all the upsides as well. So bless you for being here as well. So what we're trying to do essentially is to go 3 times faster than anyone's thinking right now. We call that time elasticity. We have to speed up time. We have to speed up time. We have to do what everyone is holding as 2050, we have to do it by 2030. And in the case of Isla Vista, because this is probably the best incubator that I have found on the planet, I mean, think about it. Everyone, 10, 12 people live in a house. Most people don't have cars. The footprint of the city, which we're working with Garrett to actually discover, is so primed because we could do so much. And the university's got this commitment by 2025 to become carbon neutral. What better place to be able to do this kind of experiment? So that's our goal. Okay, so we've done it before. We know that it could be done. We were having a meeting today with the chancellor of the university, this wonderful being, Henry Yang. Some of you know him well. Some of you have heard of him. And I was explaining the moonshot. And some of you may or may not know this, but when they got the assignment from Kennedy to put a man on the moon and bring him back within a decade, they went and did an analysis of what capabilities they had, and they found out they had 20% of what they needed. And they had to achieve this goal in 10 years. When they got there, and they did a post-analysis, or if you will, an after-action review, they found out that, in fact, the 80% already existed, and all they had to do was find it. All they had to do was discover it. So our job is to discover. We've already been discovering over our time here all these resources. Every time I speak to someone, they say, oh, I got this piece, and I got this piece, and I got this piece. So putting them together is part of this moonshot process. So we've done it before. We can do it again. And of course, World War II, we had to mobilize in 4 years and win a war. So why not? Now, we've got this by 2030. Here, of course, we have to go a little faster because we have more opportunity, so more is expected of us. So Isla Vista. Why Isla Vista? So vulnerable. This is one of the most vulnerable communities in California to climate disruption, right? It's right on the precipice. You know, we go off the cliff, and all of a sudden, some percentage of the community is not here anymore. The density, the transit footprint, which I mentioned. The ethos, as John said, right? This is where the modern environmental movement got birthed in 50 years ago. I mean, what an amazing credential. Why not be the place where it gets birthed again? Now with a lot a lot riding on it. The student passion, such a pleasure. They're so excited, they're so passionate. And the brain power. I mean, this is one of the leading universities around environmental research, around environmental studies. We can do some amazing things when we bring that brain power together. And the creativity. And the goal, as I mentioned. Aside from Copenhagen, to the best of my knowledge, the only other place that has a commitment of carbon neutrality by 2025 is the UC system. So it's an early adopter for sure. And as we found out, the community service district is 2 years old. There's no embeddedness in this community. They're looking for how do we do this. When we spoke with the manager of the community services district today, he said, let's do it. So we have a shot at something extraordinary. We really have a shot at something extraordinary. And we are ready, we believe. We now have a team, which I've told you about. 200 students in John's class have participated. We've had 30 cool blocks in play or have completed. We've achieved this kind of significant footprint reduction per household, and we have these amazing partnerships that are primed and ready to go. So we have a lot going for us. So how does it work? How will we scale? So far, so good. We have the right place, the right time, the right need. How does it actually, and we have a tool that can scale, how does it actually work? So this is the process by which you scale from a block. If you can think of a block as in a human organism as the cell level, how does it begin to scale at each level? So what you're going to see as what we call climate action capacity getting built. So the goal here, if it's going to be driven from people, which has got to be driven by people, then we have to build climate action capacity, which I described we're building on the scale of a block. So then that moves to the neighborhood, and you'll start to see the meter turning more to the right. Now we're learning how to work at the scale of a neighborhood. We can do things that we couldn't do at a block, we can do at a neighborhood level. Some of the stuff that Ronaldo's very excited about, the microgrids and things of that sort. Then you move it up to the district level, and you start seeing the innovations happening at that level. Block to neighborhood, neighborhood to district, and then you keep moving it up to a city level. 25% is our goal, minimum number of blocks, which tips it. So now it starts diffusing. But we don't stop at that level because that's not enough. We have to start working at the regional level and eventually the state level. And as John spoke to, we have to show how California can become a carbon neutral state by 20. We want to move it up by at least 5 years to 2040. So the idea being is that the process just keeps scaling. And at each level of scale, it's not just bottom up, but it's top down, bottom up, top down, bottom up, whole system at each level. So the whole thing is getting integrated. So how does it work in a very specific situation? So let's take transit, which is the #1 issue here in Isla Vista and in most cities, where most of the footprint of a city exists. So when you start taking someone through the cool block, they start walking more and biking more and sharing rides and using e-bikes and public transit and whatever. You start creating demand from the bottom for this kind of change, which then starts to create demand for the supply. Sidewalks, charging stations, dollars for e-bikes, new transit systems. So the system starts to now get integrated. Bottom up starts to create the demand. The top down now starts to create a new capability, and this virtuous spiral starts to happen. And all of a sudden, possibilities that weren't there before start to get born. And in time, new investments come in, and this process begins. And it's very much a virtuous spiral, but you have to have the whole system working. You can't just do it through advocacy from the bottom. You can't just do it from supply demand, supply side interventions. You've got to bring the whole system together. And when you do that, you start seeing possibilities that weren't there before. Fewer car trips, requires less parking. It goes on. These are the kinds of things that you can see as you start to see the points in this slide. And that is just the beginning, because that is a system that's part of a whole system, so it can activate all the other parts of the system if we are wise enough, skillful enough to build these whole systems. So all of a sudden now you have the resilience in transit and food and resource stewardship and jobs and economy, and the whole system starts to work as a whole, which it always has the capacity to do, but no one's figured out how to integrate it. And I'm not suggesting we have, but I think we have a pathway to doing that. More to be said about that. So how does this actually translate into a carbon neutral city? So we have identified 5 different teams of people that have to work together creatively, intelligently, smartly to be able to do this. So we need a technology team who can bring the technologies that we need into play. We need a finance team who can bring the resources for the new infrastructure that's going to be required. We need a policy team who can start to figure out what are the policies that allow this to work. By the way, in this room alone, we have people who could play significant roles on all those teams. And thank you all for coming, because some of you I've spoken to already about that. And then we have the community engagement team, which really manages the full bottom-up process. And then a synergy team, because what is known to happen in community engagement is that they get siloed. So we need one team that figures out how this process is able to continuously get integrated. What do we learn from technology that can help finance? What do we learn from finance that can help the community engagement? How does that work? So from my years of experience on building empowerment systems, this is how you empower a system. Okay, so this process, though, doesn't just build this kind of content capacity. It also builds what you might call social capital, which is the community cohesion, trust, and what we call second-order change. Second-order change being transformative social change capacity, being able to move a system to a higher level of performance and social value, needed to achieve a carbon-neutral city. So while we're building the content, we're also building these less overt but more subtle dimensions that build the long-term capacity for the kind of change that's going to require everyone to be involved. There's no one who sits out this change. In fact, if there's anyone sitting on the sideline, then it's a failure in the design, because everyone needs to be involved. So what does the scaling mechanism look like? If Isla Vista does its job, it scales across California. It scales across California. We've had the good fortune of having conversations with Gavin Newsom and his team, and he's very interested to see how this model can scale. He's ready and waiting when we have something more to share with them. They're eager. They are plateaued. They don't know how to get this job done by themselves. They are the classic example of we've done a lot from the top down, but we don't know how to go any further. So what does the scaling look like across California? So this is our strategy. We want to work with 50 cities, Isla Vista being the beginning, along with Silicon Valley. Over 3 years, we want to get a 25% or more carbon footprint reduction, and we want to get 25% or more of the blocks, and we want to do that in 5 years. So we are now moving into what you would call the territory of being unreasonable. There's nothing reasonable at all about what I'm saying. So we have to now transcend the normal ways we think about time. And so we're going to have to figure out how to do that. But that's what we need to do. And we can do it if we can get smart enough and creative enough, and the will is there. So that's the beginning. The next part is what we call stage 2, which is to start creating carbon neutral cities by 2030. And there we're looking to raise $100 million. And we would be investing $1.5 million a city, which is our seed capital investment to help the cities achieve their goal. That's not all the money they need, but it's the starting point for the process. In order to do that, they have to have demonstrated they're at least a cool city, which is 25% or more participation of the blocks. And then we want to create what we call a carbon neutral city prize of $10 million that will start investing in the first cities as another level of incentive. So that's the pathway. And this fund ultimately is going to be what we think will get us started. It's not all the money we need, and if we are successful, think about this, if we're successful, we are opening up the carbon neutral city marketplace, which people estimate is $1 trillion. So that's the potential we're talking about. And when I was speaking with the chancellor today, I said, you know, UCSB can be the source of that. This could be the place where those new technologies are designed, where those new possibilities, where the students are at Bren School are going to create the future of what we need. So that's what's at stake in terms of the upside, aside from the planet's viability. And then that becomes the pathway to a carbon neutral state by 2040. So starting to bring this into the home stretch here. So what are the key ingredients necessary, not on the content side, but on the human dimension side, on the individual side? We need these 4 ingredients, in my experience of empowerment. We need the power of a compelling vision, a vision so powerful that you could land a man on the moon, bring him back home in 10 years. That's what we're talking about, that level of vision. It's a moonshot, compelling vision. We have it. Innovation driven by necessity. Extinction, that's a good one, driven by necessity. Catalyst from the bottom, behavioral change. The individual source of change is always the individual. Never doubt a small group of people can change the world, says Margaret Mead. They're the ones that have always done it. And an idea whose time has come. Victor Hugo's famous line. An idea whose time has come is, we have to change. How do we do it? So we have those ingredients. And what we're bringing on top of that are these 4. Audacity. Audacity is based on being unreasonable. Audacity is based on a dream that seems impossible. Audacity is based on a possibility that, if successful, will transform humanity. That's the level we're playing at with this dream. And we are looking at what we call abundance, right? We're not looking to raise $10,000. We're looking to raise $100 million and open up $1 trillion economy. We're looking at making a community that currently exists in one mode into a mode that it's never seen before, speed of change that no one's ever seen before. That requires an attitude of enough, not scarcity, but enough. There's plenty of creativity, plenty of intelligence, plenty of will if properly mobilized. And we're trying to build a sense of what we call alchemy. Alchemy meaning 1 and 1 equals 3. You bring all these 4 elements together and you get something that is way beyond any one of them. And lastly, agency, the work of my wife and I, Gail, in our institute, which is building agency. I am, I can, we are, we can, it's possible. You bring all those things together and you start to have the makings of a carbon neutral Isla Vista by 2025. And how does one do that? You're the 80%. You're going to tell me. I brought you together for exactly this question. And this vision has the elements, but we can't get there without everyone's help. And it's not just the people in this room. It's We're getting a call from someone already who's interested. They didn't wait long. Thank you. Just tell them yes. Please join us. I like that. That was a quick one. Sometimes it happens just that quick. So the opportunity then is that you know people. And if each of you knew 10 people and brought them into this, what could they bring? And if they brought 10 people, it goes on like that. We have the power to do that. So this is what it looks like as we start to move that forward. So Isla Vista starts creating carbon neutral cities around California, which creates a carbon neutral California by 2040, and then a carbon neutral world by 2050. That's the end game of this piece. The residual of that is that we have communities that are profoundly connected, profoundly empowered, profoundly inspired. We can do this. We know this. We can do this. And so those communities will become models. And I believe California's destiny will be achieved through this, which is the place where this stuff happens. That's why California exists on the planet, in my judgment. That's why I've come here. So California has to do this. If it doesn't, I don't know where else it's going to happen. And it can. I believe it can. So let me end with this wonderful quote that I always love. It's the Rilke quote. You'll see yourself in this quote. Again and again in history, some people wake up, they have no ground in the crowd, and they move to broader, deeper laws. They carry strange customs with them and demand room for bold and audacious action. The future speaks ruthlessly through them. They change the world. Who would like to change the world? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, you're on. So thank you so much. Let's see. So we have time for questions, comments. We have about a half an hour or so. If you have time, please stay and be with us. And let's hear your questions. I mean, there's a lot of things that I've provoked, perhaps. Please.
Hello, that was a very inspiring talk. My name is Michael. I'm the Director of Energy and Climate Programs at Community Environmental Council, and been working on all of these things for about 13 years, everything from grassroots action to policy. So I have a bunch of questions for you.
Please.
You know, especially in Isla Vista, it's a large renter community, and so how do you get the owners of the properties on board to, you know, install solar panels, to, you know, get the natural gas out of the buildings and replace them with heat pumps for water heating and space heating, and, you know, all the things that maybe the students or the renters don't have as much control over, because that, you know, owner-tenant conundrum is a really big issue.
Perfect question. Thank you. And right on point with some of the details that we have and that we don't have. So let's start with we don't have all the answers. Let's start with also that we have we are empowering the renters. We are also creating renter guides that start to build those relationships. In our conversations with the Community Service District today, we talked about creating, potentially using some of their enforcement wherewithal to start moving things forward, some top-down, some bottom-up. We're also hoping that a vision big enough to get everyone to see themselves in a larger context than they have before might inspire them. And we have been identifying early adopter landlords who can also help move the dial. So a variety of elements that we're starting to work. In my experience, the ultimate way this happens, it's all of the above. It's not one of only, but is that when the vision's big enough, the early adopters start to get the early majority and to the late majority. So all of a sudden, it'll start to change. The dynamic will change. There'll be an expectation from students when they rent. Here's what we need. There'll be an expectation from the university for the same. So that's the process. How does one do that is a different question. So let me speak to that also. So on Saturday, we are having an event at the community center, which is, what's it called? The Isla Vista Community Center Community Room, 1:30 to 3, and we'll be answering those questions. And we'll be starting to seed these 5 teams. So there'll be a policy team, there'll be a finance team, there'll be a technology team. And so we'll start learning how to bring our creativity together to start to answer those questions. But let's assume that we have a variety of challenges, and we also have a variety of creativity and intelligent people, and there's a lot of will to do that. And as we start to learn, we'll spiral it up. So that's my answer. Come back in a few months, and we'll have even a better answer, I hope. You're about to get a mic.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Gershon. My name is Nathan Orr. I recently just moved here from Honolulu specifically to work in this field with Ronaldo and the World Business Academy. I was curious about the Cool California Fund. I wasn't clear on where that money is actually coming from.
Good question. Thank you. So we're raising that money, and where it's coming from is still TBD. But we are looking to bring in the people who are called to change the world, who have money that they're not satisfied is getting the kind of social ROI that they're used to getting from their impact investing, who have the discretion to be able to make investments at larger denominations. We're also beginning having conversation with some Silicon Valley companies who might be very appropriate. So high net worth individuals, various types of philanthropic entities, companies, those are some of the places. We have a conversation that started with Gavin Newsom. So we're looking at whether or not we want to raise all the money and not get caught up in the government process. But there is a lot of money there, and we're talking about potentially a matching fund of $50 million that we raise and they bring 50. A lot of details.
So
but
maybe top down and bottom up.
Top down and bottom up. And then there's also crowdsourcing. Literally crowdsourcing.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Crowdsourcing.
Crowdsourcing.
Literally from the bottom, like $25 denominations, $50 denominations. Communities taking responsibility for their own funding as we start to do this. So we have a variety of ideas, and we love whatever other ideas you might wish to bring to it. I mean, it's still a work in progress. So it's a lot of money on one hand, it's not a lot of money on the other hand. And we hope that that money also starts to build what we would call the carbon neutral economy. So in some ways, for some people, this is the seeding of all this green infrastructure money that's just hanging out waiting to be invested that doesn't have enough demand for it yet. So we can start to also open up an economy. So getting in front of the right people, telling the story, having the kind of support that you guys bring to us to help us articulate and shape that would be wonderful. So you're carrying part of the 80% as well, I suspect. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Faye Cox, a local entrepreneur with a publishing idea that I believe is part of this for sure.
I bet it is.
Yeah, no accidents. I'm wondering about your governance and decision-making processes for putting coalitions of this complexity together and hoping that sociocracy might be a part of it.
Let's assume that it is.
Okay.
And we don't know how it works yet.
Okay.
But the answer is we have to build new models for, I would say decision-making is a puzzle piece, but I'd also say another puzzle piece is group genius. So what we need is not just to get people in the room to figure out a line on an idea, but we need to tap what we call the group genius or the collective intelligence, which is often not done very well in a lot of processes. So we'll be very much looking for the kinds of processes that can enable that group genius to birth the kinds of new ideas that don't exist yet. Just about everything we're doing in the configuration we're talking about does not exist, but it does exist here or there. We just have to piece them together. So I'm very eager to hear whatever your ideas are, and this is an incubator. We want to test them.
I'd love to bring some of that along. I'm learning about, well, I've
Thank
trained
you.
in it, and I think it is a process for getting to group genius and collective wisdom. So,
Yes.
and
Which-
it's a beginning.
We need that.
Hi, I'm Julia Fine. I'm a grad student in linguistics, and I use she, her pronouns. I was just interested in hearing also in the spirit of what kinds of collective intelligence we can bring, what the role for research might be in this process. Delcia and I are actually part of a student-led research team looking at collective action, specifically environmental justice action, and how to support activists, how to recruit new people, and also get buy-in from the administration and faculty. So I'm just curious, what might the role be for faculty and student researchers who are interested in participating in this kind of process and also helping to reflexively analyze what we could be doing better, what we can learn from?
If you want to think of this in one term, it's research. I mean, we have to figure out how to carefully analyze what works, what doesn't work. We have to have theses that we're testing. We have to be able to build credibility around each of these things. We have done our own research, not as diligent as one would do if you were a formal research team, on getting the data that we've gotten so far. There are going to be new technologies we'll need to apply. Research is huge. So one of the conversations we want to have is with you guys on how to build the research. There's a whole bunch of things we want to start researching. We could have a whole list together. And we'd love to work with the student body and the faculty to build the kind of research projects that we're going to need. And John and I have already begun thinking about some of those kinds of research projects. So thank you. Yes, we need your help. I want to have you hand the mic to Shaylin. So Shaylin is our partner in crime, our student partner in crime, a block leader, and also been working with us on this crazy idea called Carbon Neutral Isla Vista. We invited her to the meeting with the chancellor, and of course she won the heart of the chancellor because she has this passion, and I want you to share any thoughts you might have as...
Well, I was actually going to ask for the mic, so thank you. Thank you for handing it to me.
You're welcome.
Something that comes to my mind as a student, and being a student with the mic now, while we're talking about all of this, the kind of thesis here is bringing together all these different parts and putting them into an actionable plan. Something about Cool Block that really appealed to me is that it's a step-by-step process that's been proven to work. It's not something we're trying. We know our end goal, but how do we get there? This is a way to get there. And the thing that's so powerful about having it here in Isla Vista and then hopefully at other college communities is that it's kind of, in my mind, added to our college experience. You come as an undergrad and your mind is so open and you're so ready to absorb these things, and you've also haven't lived on your own yet. So yes, there's those renter-tenant relationships that you're gonna have most of your life probably, but once you start building those skills now, everywhere you go, you have those skills with you going on to it, you know? So like my freshman year, I was like, oh, I can't wait to live in a house. And if I had these ideas on me going forward, then like as a renter, I'm like, okay, this is what I want from Block 1. No pun intended. Or this is what I want as a homeowner that I'm going to implement right away, right off the bat. This is just what it is for me. So eventually, once we start this, that's just going to become the new normal because people are educated in that way. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheila. So, so let's take one moment. Let's just close your eyes for one moment. Take a deep breath. And you project yourself 5 years into the future. It's 2025. Isla Vista has become carbon neutral. Cities all over the world have come to study Isla Vista. Universities all over the world have come to study how it got done. The world has hope. It sees a future. It sees a possibility that currently doesn't exist in the current state of our psyche. It sees young people changing the world with hope, with skills, with knowledge, with passion. It sees a university showing up and opening up the universe of possibilities in a profound way. It sees politicians, government agencies operating at their highest ideal of contribution. Businesses bring the best of what's possible. Community organizations, local nonprofits, showing how to actually implement so many of these beautiful solutions and finding a role for themselves that puts them right at the center of so much of the change that's necessary and so much of what they want to do. They now have the platform and achieved it. But it's just the beginning. Now we have to build the whole world. Carbon neutral is not the end game. That's the opening act. And imagine each of you who, for whatever reason, found yourself in this room tonight, by choice, by coincidence, at ground zero for this change. And the question is, what am I doing that has allowed that to succeed? What did I do as a result of being here? What did I do? How did I shift? What did I bring to this? There's absolutely enough people in this room to change the world. We're 2 or 3 times more than we need. So just receive that. Meditate on that. Allow it into your deepest part of your being. This is our time. We must seize it. And we will. So thank you all for all that you bring, and assume it's done. Assume it's done, and you made it happen. So those of you that are inspired, come on Saturday. Those of you who are inspired to start on your block and be part of the solution where you live, please come and see Robin. And anyone else who has any inspirations that they want to share with Robin, myself, or John, or Shaylin, please reach us. Thank you all for your wonderful attention.